everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sports Hut podcast. It's nice to see Bruce with us again this week, taking a week off last week for his engagement. Congratulations, Bruce.
Thank you very much.
With his engagement, we could all see he has passion running through his veins, as well as a high percentage of saturated fat. James, it's nice to see you again here, ever present on the podcast. For those who don't know, James went to St Andrews University. And him being on the Sports Hut podcast is the equivalent of having a computer but no electricity. And then you've got Shahan down there. He's got OCD, which means his sex life is very difficult. Because after he turns someone on, he's got to make sure he goes back and turns them off again. Now, on that note, I think should we get on with this episode, as the Welsh say, Mana Mana Monkey, might as well. The first topic we're going to go to is Bruce today. He's going to introduce the first one about the postponement of one of the biggest games in English football, the Manchester United and Liverpool game.
Yeah, so I'm sure everybody's seen today the scenes at the Manchester United Liverpool game, and just I started off by looking at the Sun online as a source just to get some idea around about it. So around 200 protesters gathered at the hotel, which meant that the teams couldn't leave the hotel to even get to the stadium due to safety concerns. And then around another 1,000 fans were at Old Trafford. I heard on the radio there that 2 police officers have been injured due to bottles and metal crowd barriers being thrown at police and horses. And so one's got a slash wound to the face. They've had to go to hospital. Some pretty horrific scenes, to be honest. And part of me understands why they're angry. We've all seen when the European Super League came out, and then the backlash against all the owners. But still not defendable to a point, is it? What do you guys think in terms of? So first of all, if we didn't have a pandemic on the go just now, would there be would we think it was horrific given the large crowds? Because at the moment, there's a pandemic on the go, large crowds were gathered, there's a public health issue as well as their behaviour being out of order. Do we think that there would be such an issue if we didn't have the public health issue going on with the large crowds?
Well, I think the fact that fans went into the stadium before the match, people would have called that out, even if there wasn't a pandemic, and stopping the team leaving the hotel. But again, I understand the frustration of Man United fans. The Glazer family bought Man United thinking it was a soccer club. They didn't understand football and how deep-rooted it is in culture, and the European Super League was just the epitome of that. And fans want their club back. They want to be local, wants to be in the community, give back, and also wants to start investing in the team. Man United fans remember the Sir Alex Ferguson days, winning trophies, being at the end of European competitions every season, whereas now they don't do that. They are happy with, the owners appear to be happy with Champions League qualifications, getting a big name signing every couple of years to generate shirt sales. And yeah, that's about it. And Man United fans feel aggrieved. So I support them in their grievance, but doing what they did was wrong. But yeah, there was only one benefit from the postponement of the game today. And Gavin, in his segue, mentioned some Welsh. I was in the bathtub today during the game because I watched the game and there was no game on. So I was in the bathtub learning some Welsh, and I learned that squash in Welsh is spunking. There you go.
Random fact for the day.
Anyways, going back to this, I just don't think, going back to football, I don't think what happened is excusable whether there's a pandemic or not. I know there's a lot of frustration, but they're actually going in and damaging property, and that's not acceptable. It's just radical. Like a few fans behaving ludicrously and It's not acceptable. And then obviously for them to act like that, not letting teams in, they're actually taking away the football from themselves essentially. So why would you want that? Like, that's a game of football that was supposed to be viewed on TV, which they never then got viewed on TV. So they've actually lost money on that essentially, on the views of that, like sales of the TV sales of it and things like that. So
I think there's two ways to look at it. You can either look at it in terms of Bruce was saying about if the pandemic was happening, or if there wasn't a pandemic, it'd be a sellout crowd. Would it then be a case of this protest happening? Probably not. I think because of the pandemic is the reason it happened in this way, because they weren't able to go to the game and show their grievance in a formal protest up to the stadium, inside the stadium, showing their displeasure at the Glazers, and it's happened for a long time. You know, Gary Neville spoke about it multiple times with the whole European Super League, about how the Glazers have stolen the identity of the football club. So in that sense, they didn't have another opportunity to do a formal protest. Did it go too far? Arguably, yes. But, you know, I don't think anyone's ever going to forget the scenes of the people storming the stadium, something out of a movie, you know, walking down the streets of Manchester with the corner flag held above their head. You know, all that was missing was a nice wee serendipitous ice skating on the pitch and a little showpiece.
Where did you pull that word from?
From a thesaurus. But yeah, I do think that they were right to show their grievance because they had no other opportunity to do it.
So is it okay for them to go and smash things up then?
I never said that.
Or injure police officers.
I think,
again, I never said that. I never said that their actions in terms of what was carried out, in terms of the destruction, is of course that's not acceptable. However, they have a right to protest. And because they didn't have another manner of doing that, such as a stadium full, where, you know, you've got Woodward sitting in the stands and potential other people with maybe Glazer would show up for a game if he felt like it. You know what I mean? They would show their displeasure then. This happens.
I don't think it was.
You get protests happening during games.
I don't
but
think
they're not
it
allowed
was.
To do that.
I know, but actions of some of these extreme fans, I don't think is equitable for the actual players that were supposed to be playing. They're putting them under pressure by protesting outside the hotels, not letting them leave. It's not equitable for the fans that are ready to watch the game in their house peacefully. So I don't think it's like, I know show your grievance, but again, we've got social media for that, and people don't try to go on social media anyway, so show it there. Protests like Chelsea did, but they still had a game. I know obviously they were stopping the bus, but they would still let the game go ahead. Do you know what I mean?
I think,
but they didn't smash into the stadium and start.
I think as
cameras and things like that.
I think as Gav says, you know, their actions today were not acceptable in any, you know, wild imagination. But the protest today took part of the way it did because of the nature of the situation at the moment. I think, as Gav was saying, if we had a full stadium of fans, you would have maybe seen a ticket boycott or something to hit the pocket of the owners, which in normal times has been done by a crowd of fans in various clubs before. I think for me, James, you are one for believing in the clubs being punished for the conduct of their fans. So are you expecting the FA to be taking punishment against Manchester United, the innocent party to an extent, over the conduct of their fans?
I would expect, well, I don't actually expect any punishment. I expect there to be a fine at the absolute most, and the game to be rearranged. If Liverpool were in contention for Champions League, it could have been different trying to fit the game in. But yeah, Man U fans have made it more difficult for them because they're probably going to be in the Europa League final. So trying to fit in a game between then and the end of the season is going to be difficult, and players will have less time to rest. I'm not expecting the match to be forfeited by Man United. I don't think the Premier League will go that far. But they should be accountable for the actions of the fans. It was their fans that made the game not go ahead. And if they aren't punished for that, then it just sets the precedence that this is okay to go into a stadium and stop players leaving a hotel. And then again, for a protest to be effective, it has to hit the people who they're trying to protest against. Shahan was saying, and you were saying as well, about boycotts hitting revenues, usually from ticket sales, and that would hit the owners' pockets. But today, the Glazers were probably in a masonette somewhere saying, well, what's happened at my club? I don't really care, not lost any money.
Mm-hmm.
It's just bad PR for a day, it goes over to the next news story. So I don't think it'll make much of a difference.
James,
So
I
I
highly
think-
doubt that the Glazers own a masonette.
Probably
However,
own a
to-
massive mansion, but they may have a masonette.
To kind of
The son's
combat
only
that,
the chief executive of the club or something like those lines.
to kind of combat that and kind of pick up what Shahan said about the Chelsea Liverpool protests. So Chelsea fans stopped the bus coming in. However, there was action from the club. Petr Cech, someone who has a relationship with the fans, came out to try and disperse it and worked with a degree at the time. I saw no attempt from anyone involved with Manchester United. I've never not heard of anyone involved with Manchester United. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've not read or heard of anyone or seen anything where a representative of Manchester United, in terms of who has a relationship with the fans, came out to try and do anything about it. And that might do with the fact that they don't have anyone on the board who is relatable. This whole issue is why they're protesting.
Gav,
Yes.
if you were the member of the board that had the relationship with the fans, and there's fences and bottles getting thrown about, are you quite happy to go out there and put yourself in that position?
Petr Cech did.
No,
Exactly.
so I'm asking a question. If you are the person that is going out, are you happy to put yourself in that position?
If I care for my football club and I care about my fans' opinion, I share that opinion with them.
So you don't
Yes,
mind
of course.
bottles and fences getting thrown at you?
No, but if fans truly appreciate you, like the Chelsea fans obviously show that they appreciate Petr Cech because obviously they let the bus through, and you're a player that's going out there and fans truly support you and appreciate you, then they wouldn't do those kind of.
But and I could be wrong, but I don't believe the Chelsea protest was of as violent a nature as the Manchester United one was today. And I, for one, personally, I wouldn't be going out if there was bottles. And clubs have, and this is most clubs have a group of fans that go over the top. We all know that. To the point that there's 2 police officers in hospital and 2, fairly good considering the size of the protest today. There's 2 police officers in hospital injured because of the goings on. I wouldn't be going out with fences and bottles flying.
The thing is, if we are going to do this and compare them, which is a hard thing to do because of the extreme, from each side of them. If we're going on it like that, the Chelsea fans had a more peaceful protest than the Manchester United fans. Ultimately, that's agreed. However, since in that time gap that they've happened, there's been more restrictions getting lifted. So do we think alcohol possibly has played a part in it? I think definitely, especially when balls have been getting thrown about the place. But also, when you do that, you think about other protests that's happened, or celebrations, title parties, cause destruction. There's been a lot of them happening during all this. Would any of these happen if fans were allowed back in the stadiums in that manner? I
still think it would have. I still think it would have.
Not to that extent, though. I don't think.
Yeah,
You wouldn't have hundreds of fans storming Old Trafford at kickoff before the game.
Yeah,
it would be a couple of banners getting held up, maybe things getting chucked onto the pitch in terms of that protest that happened a few years ago with tennis balls.
You would maybe have the odd crowd, but it would be in either the low hundreds or high tens.
There wouldn't be as much disruption caused ultimately, but for them to say that that's their only, they feel that's their only way to show their grievance and to voice what their opinions are. It must be quite bleak times to be a Manchester United fan, especially as James said, they're possibly going to be in Europa League final. And things are that bad at the club that they're having to go and do things like that. You've got to feel for them as a fan, as a football fan. As much as a lot of people are against Manchester United, as a football fan, you have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to be like, well, where's it? Something's got to give. You know what I mean?
So I think to round this up, I just want to ask everybody, do you agree with the Manchester United fans' protest? James, you go first.
I agree with what's motivating it, but I don't agree with what they done.
Gav?
I feel like the violent actions you can't agree with that at all. But in terms of making a stand, making a point, they've made their point. So I agree with it to an extent.
And Jan?
I disagree with the actions, but I kind of agree with the actual protest.
Yeah.
But I very much disagree with the actions and the way they carried it out.
So I think while we've had some good discussions, it's very clear that as football fans, we stand with the Manchester United fans in terms of the cause that they're trying to promote here. What we're talking about on previous broadcasts about football being for the fans and it being a real kind of hub for the people on the ground level. But we totally don't condone the actions that went on and the people that were caught up in the crossfire.
I think that's a very fair summary, Bruce. But again, now with all that going on, there's a lot more action. A lot more action than what was happening in Portugal, wasn't there, James?
It was. And I'm going to surprise everyone by saying I watched the race. There you go.
What?
I watched the race.
Quelle surprise.
Do what?
All 66 laps.
All 66 laps.
Impressed.
I was, because I nearly fell asleep.
James, I take it none of this coincided with your bathtub malarkey.
And James spunking in the bathtub.
I watched the Grand Prix, then went into the bath, but I didn't play any squash.
Well, just played with yourself.
The Hamilton won again.
Boys.
Insert comment from Martin about the Grand Prix. I think I picked the most boring race of the season thus far to watch. Maybe the drivers don't like me and just say go into boring mode when James is watching. I don't know. But Gavin, I'm guessing you would have watched some of the race at least. What were your thoughts on it?
I do think it was a fairly boring race up until obviously the first few laps were quite, as you always, a wee bit exciting. Towards the end, we saw a bit more tactical play come into it. There was a lot of, obviously, for James, you only watched, I believe it must have been the race you only watched. Did you watch practice or qualifying?
No.
So practice was a bit more exciting, same with qualifying. Practice, we had a few wee tussles with Nikita Mazepin again. I thought I actually messaged you about how he was trending on Twitter due to his shenanigans.
Because he made Mitchell look fast.
Causing disruptions.
Would he make me look fast?
I mean, that's maybe pushing the metaphor a bit too far.
But no, he had an altercation in the last race with Giovinazzi, not moving out of the way for him during a flying lap. And he had the exact same situation this time with Sergio Perez.
Yep.
And once again, spinning about on the gravel traps like an infinity figure of eight. He is officially going to be called the anal Emma of Formula One. He's all over the place at the moment, and he genuinely is. I don't know why he's there, but the race itself fairly boring up until the last few laps when everyone was going for the fastest lap, and it was Perez, then Bottas pitted for fresh soft tyres to go and get the fastest lap. He got the fastest lap. Verstappen's like, I'll do it as well. Lewis Hamilton even got a radio saying, they're doing this, do you want to do it as well? And he was like, I might as well, but then he didn't. But then Verstappen got the fastest lap in I think it was the second last lap of it was the last lap of the race. Yeah. And then he got cancelled because he exceeded track limits at turn 14, a turn that they weren't actually monitoring track limits for the entire weekend. which is another argument for Verstappen in terms of his points that he's lost this season. He wasn't happy after qualifying, and he wasn't happy as well after the race, which I think shows his frustrations at how this weekend has been for him.
Another thing that I noticed today was that Lewis Hamilton is not entirely honest when he's speaking to the radio. See, when he says the tyres are done and then drives about 10 more laps after it, you go, I don't think you're being entirely honest, Lewis. But
I didn't watch Formula One this weekend, but Gav,
shocking.
Do tell me how my Georgie Williams Russell got on. I see he finished 16th. I just had a wee look.
He qualified very well.
Good.
He had a very good qualifying. I think it was 11th he qualified. Shahan will probably be able to.
Yeah,
brilliant.
So he was almost into the final qualifying. However,
his best
wasn't.
Yeah, his best qualifier in the Williams car. Sorry, go on, Gavin.
Yeah, the race wasn't too good.
Yeah.
He
maybe he was looking at my Facebook again or something.
Basically, they said that apparently the Williams car is not working well when it's like hitting turbulence or if there's any wind on track, which there was today. So
how can you not build a race car that deals with the wind? It's kind of like part of what a vehicle has to cope with.
James, as you watch Drive to Survive, you will soon start to realise why Williams haven't built a car that can tackle turbulence.
Williams has no.
No, but
anyways, we're kind of lucky. We're kind of lucky that Williams have built a car at all, if I'm honest. Right?
Yeah, but my Volkswagen Golf can cope with wind. Why can't the F1 car not?
Oh. I mean, talking about Formula, like the Drive to Survive, I think that's what kind of got me into Formula One. But watching the race today, man, and even for the past few years, I feel like I'm now actually getting bored of Hamilton winning constantly. He has actually became like the cat so schwaff, and you've got like dogs basically chasing after him, like you do in a dog race.
So you're chasing?
Is it a rabbit?
You just said that Lewis Hamilton was a squirrel tail.
Yeah, and that's what the dogs chase in the dog racing. So it's always ahead.
It's a rabbit.
Oh, is that a rabbit? Right. Okay,
yeah, I think
bad.
so.
But it's like the point is that he's always ahead, and everybody else is chasing after him. Everybody else is chasing after him.
And is a squirrel's tail.
But everybody else is chasing after him. Because I thought that's what they used. I didn't realize it was a rabbit. But right, anyway, so and literally he was always at front, and he goes out, wins the race, comes back. That's it. Next location, goes out, wins the race, and everybody else is still chasing after him. And I think it's become like a repetitive thing. It's almost becoming like Formula One has almost become boring for me, based on just Hamilton winning constantly. And obviously in the pre-season testing, when I obviously seen like the Mercedes trials and they were really struggling, I thought that might actually give other teams a little bit of an edge, where teams like McLaren and Ferrari might even then challenge them. Obviously, Red Bull was always going to challenge them this season, anyways. But it's not seemed to be happening. Like the top four were Mercedes and Red Bulls.
That was
I think
Lewis Hamilton being dishonest again. You know, he's not got a good track record. But you were talking about
James and his honesty.
I know, but you're talking about boredom and repetitiveness, and I think this is actually the bigger news from F1 this week, is that they're trying to introduce something to address this, which is sprint qualifying. I've got my thoughts on it.
Right, James, come on, sprint qualifying, tell us, go for it.
Enlighten our viewers.
No, because I'm not an expert in the sport at all. I think it's only right that we go to our resident expert after he downs his can of Strongbow. And
other ciders are available.
Let him explain his thoughts on sprint qualifying. I'm
glad that you think that I am an expert.
At least he's an expert in something, eh?
In this. Just like James is an expert in history and his anti-disestablishmentarianism and
playing
his
squash
views upon that and such. And playing spunking in the bath. in his maisonette that's owned by the Glazers. You know what a man he is.
Chasing Lewis Hamilton.
Is that the book that you've been reading in your bathtub, James?
Chasing
that
Lewis Hamilton, which is just like a squirrel's tail.
Tell you what, this is hilarity tonight.
Welcome Castle
yeah,
Swarth.
to
Exactly.
go on elaborate on James's point as we get back on track.
Good pun. Good pun.
Quite back on track. See that? Unlike Nikita Mazepin, bastard.
Like Perez, just Verstappen. One of them getting back on track.
Well done there, James. Helped you. But yeah, the sprint qualifying. So this is effectively a mini race. I believe it's over 100 kilometers that the participants will say. I don't want to say overpaid sports personalities because I highly doubt half of them are overpaid. But yeah, the participants go around 100 kilometers of the track to establish their grid position for the actual race. So I believe it's a practice, then a qualifying for the sprint qualifying, and there's also going to be points available for the sprint qualifying, which I think might make it interesting.
So,
but they're only doing 50% of this. This is where my issue with this. Give me a second. My issue with this is that F2, it's done in F2. It does it where you get that, there's 2 sprint races. So that's your grid. Wherever you finish from the first sprint qualifying race, the top 10 is flipped. This comes on James's point as he raises his hand. This comes to James's point that he made a few weeks ago about the qualifying. You should flip. So if your best car should start at the back and get to everyone. But they're only doing 50% of the sprint qualifying from the F2 is what I believe. We'll go with Shahan first. He had his hand up first.
Right. Anyway, so what my question was, how do they start the race, no, the sprint qualifier? Like who starts at the front, and then how is it decided who's is it just literally a race between all 20 of them down this 100 kilometers and see who finishes first?
Yes, so they have a qualifying like they normally do have a qualifying, and that determines you're starting on the grid for the sprint qualifying.
Right.
And then so whatever you place in the first qualifying, that's where you start for the mini
sprint
race sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And then for the sprint, wherever you finish, that is where you start on the grid for the actual race on the Sunday.
So essentially, what they're doing is 2 races.
Effectively, so they're doing a qualifying like they do a time session. Then they're doing a mini race for points that are available to try and get it more competitive, and then they're doing the actual race.
But I bet you though, Lewis Hamilton will still be first in the sprint qualifier, and he'll still be first in the actual race. He will have Gentacular. He will go inside his car and he will base it.
It's a weird one in the sense of he needs to get more. There needs to be more competition with him. And
I mean,
this season, I still think there will be. I still think there will be competition this year. You're forgetting Perez isn't getting the best out of his car. He's still getting used to how it's built. It's built for Verstappen to drive. It's not built for him. Once he gets used to that and the driving style, he will perform better. I thought he had a very good race today. Then you've got Ricardo. Ricardo is still getting used to the car. He's only going to get better. These new drivers that are coming in, even Sainz had a decent-ish race until he had tyre troubles this afternoon. They're going to get better and they're going to start challenging and pushing. And you know for a fact, Leclerc always does better on the Saturday in qualifying. There's people who do amazing at setting a 1 lap time for the qualifying. People like Leclerc, Ricardo, Norris, they will start pushing, I think, and challenging the higher teams.
I do think there will be challenge, but the only challenge I think that would come from would either be Bottas, but let's be honest, Mercedes is probably going to make Hamilton win at the end, or it'll be from Max Verstappen for the time being, anyways. Because obviously Sergio Perez will give competition, but not at the moment. I think he's still.
I think until they get used to the cars, yeah. Right, Bruce, you had your hand up as well.
Oh, thank you very much, Gavin Smith, esteemed Formula One expert, for allowing me to ask my question. I was wondering if any of these changes benefit Williams at all.
It kind of doesn't really benefit anyone.
I'm not interested if it's not in the benefit of Williams.
They're just trying to make it more exciting to fans and people like James, who is a casual, semi-casual at best watcher. So make him a bit more interested in it because they should, in theory, there should be more overtakes.
So do they still line up on a grid for the sprint?
Yes.
Okay.
But basically, they've got a much shorter time to try to get to their kind of first position, essentially.
So Williams have no chance whatsoever of doing anything.
Strategy comes into it a lot more.
So they have to go much faster and try to overtake more. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
that'd be
so
And I believe there'll be no pits. I think if I'm right in saying, I think the length of the race means there won't be any pit stops unless you get a puncture or an issue with your front wing or such. You need to get a
So-
repair.
so to answer my question, we've all seen the Williams car. The answer was no, Gavin.
They might. Don't get me wrong. With the way that they do perform sometimes, depending on the track, Russell
And-
could get himself up. Latifi had his first finish this season in a race, which was very good for Latifi, down in 19th, I believe it was, or 18th. I think no, 18th because Mazepin would have been 19th. Because Raikkonen crashed.
Yes, you're correct, Gav.
but
But yeah, James, raise your hand. James had a question as well. We need to address James's
okay.
question.
I didn't have a question. I was nodding in agreement.
But yeah, you put your hand up though. We just
Oh,
doing
yes,
that for
I just put
Oh,
my hand up.
I
Just,
I think he was
to-
just showing us.
effect.
yeah, that was just so I
James,
wasn't
here's the
isolated
important
and on
thing.
my own.
Here's the
Just
important
wanted to
thing.
join in.
Agreement with who?
Me.
I think you all agreed with each other.
Oh.
So basically, I was
I
saying,
was just wondering if you were agreeing with me. That was all.
I was just forwarding Gavin's point there and saying that I think everybody knows that George Russell especially does really well in qualifying. So if he takes sprint race as a qualifier, then I think he should do well. But again, who knows?
Here's
There's
hoping.
Williams. There's Williams.
I've kind of made myself out to be a bit of an idiot following Williams this season.
The thing that
That's why you shouldn't just do it out of the hat.
Well, you know.
the thing that I don't understand, and this is my expert opinion kicking in,
Relationships, sexual intercourse,
Spunking in the bath.
females.
you've got a situation where people are saying racing is boring. And what do? Introduce another race. It's like, okay, it doesn't really make any sense.
James,
Surely,
have you watched F2?
yes, I have.
Have you watched a sprint race in F2?
Yes,
How many?
enough to be sufficient in answering this question, but not a lot.
Were you excited?
No.
This is the same guy who gets excited reading a book about expected goals.
But more importantly,
Other
James, can
books
I
are
borrow-
available.
more importantly, obviously, once suitably sanitised in post-pandemic, can I borrow that book?
Yes.
Some of the
what-
pages might be stuck together.
What I'm trying to say is the teams who, the constructors, to try and be more
There we go.
F1
Thanks.
Irish
Well
terminology,
done, James.
the constructors who have the money to make the best cars will win the race and they'll be the front of the grid. So what I
That's
think this
not even-
is
So-
what I actually think this is F1 thinking of a way to increase prices for fans to attend on Saturday.
Yeah.
Because there's a race happening. It's not just qualifying. There's now a race. So we can charge you hundreds of pounds rather than high tens for you to come.
The only
I just
fair
think
way
it's
for-
money and TV behind this rather than the enjoyment of the sport.
I know what you
only-
mean about like. Oh, sorry. On you go, Bruce.
Sorry, the only way I think for this to be exciting and a little bit fairer is for reverse gridding and make Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and actually race and actually put in some work when they're running around that track.
Why not reverse grid the qualifying race? Make the sprint race fun.
Gav's shaking his head. He's not happy. We've upset him.
No, but listen, you're not thinking about this, right? If you do reverse gridding, who is at the finishing last and therefore going to be at the front of the grid? Yes.
Williams.
No.
Well, Haas and Williams were down the
Right,
bottom.
Haas. No, tell me a driver from Haas who's only in it because his dad's a sponsor and is probably going to buy Haas.
Mazepin.
I referred to him earlier as the anal lemma of F1.
I know this one. It's Mazepin.
Is Mazepin, right? If you have Mazepin starting on pole position in a reverse gridding situation, you're not going to have anyone finishing the fucking race. He's going to spin out and crash into everyone. The boy got promoted. No, listen, the boy got promoted from F2 to F1, and he's driving 2 seconds slower than everyone else in an F1 car. He's basically driving like he's back in F2.
But it's more exciting. Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and Perez and etc. have to actually put a shift in to get to the front of the pack.
Aye, they've also got to put a shift in to get out of the race alive with him driving.
Actually use some skills instead of just being at the front and driving round the circuit.
Right, but with folk like Mazepin and Russell driving at the front,
Excuse me,
I mean, you saw Russell, he almost killed Bottas last week, last race.
Yeah, that's what happens when he was checking on my social media boycott.
Like, come
Russell
on,
is
you need
phenomenal.
to realise this is it won't work because you're going to have everyone just.
Russell is God's gift to Formula One, and we're all just going to do reverse grid and life will be great.
Well, I think we have came up with no agreement, which is good. Good debate. Sprint qualification. Let us know your thoughts. Because we don't have any coherent ones. But moving on, I'll pass over to Gavin to lead the third topic.
Yeah, so the final topic, a bit more serious. No doubt we'll manage to bring some form of lightheartedness to it. But the recent events this week that happened in the lower leagues of Scottish football regarding the alleged, as I say alleged loosely because obviously there's been denials and such coming out, but the alleged abuse of David Cox of Albion Rovers in their Scottish League 2 game with Stenhousemuir, where James Tiffany had apparently mentioned and I don't really know the best way to say it, insulted, if you want to use that word, his previous mental health difficulties and his past attempted suicide. But I think if we don't want to focus too much on that one incident as it is being investigated, and there has been obviously this Stenhousemuir player saying that he didn't do it and it was a bit of to and fro between the dugouts and the pitch, it kind of highlights a lot of previous issues that have gone about on the football field in particular, if we're going to talk about football in particular with this instance.
Gav, just to clarify, was it not Jonathan Tiffany?
It might have been Jonathan Tiffany. I don't know.
I think, well, let's not just start accusing people left, right and centre if they're not. I think it was Jonathan Tiffany. I don't know who James Tiffany is, but it wasn't him.
Okay.
Nobody go after James Tiffany, or don't go after anybody, but it wasn't him.
Jonathan
Tiffany. He's innocent.
Jonathan Tiffany,
Tiffany,
Scottish football player who plays for Stenhousemuir as a right back.
Apologies to James Tiffany. But yeah, so I do think it highlights the wider issue of support systems. I remember when this obviously instance happened midweek, I messaged everyone and I informed everyone that this was one of the topics I did as my graded unit at college. It's something that I did a lot of research into. So I'm going to just say 4 names, okay? And I want you to tell me if you know anything about them, okay? So I'll start off with Dale Roberts.
Name rings a bell.
Roberts?
Did he play football?
Yes. Dale Roberts was a goalkeeper. He played for teams like Middlesbrough. I believe it was Russian and Diamonds that he played for last. He hung himself after an injury caused severe depression, and it was publicised in multiple media about his wife having an affair with Paul Terry, who is the brother of John Terry. We're going to go for another one, so we're going to go with Chris Mitchell.
I know Chris Mitchell. He played for Falkirk. He jumped in front of a train. Is that right? No.
So Chris Mitchell, we'll probably more known where we are, former Falkirk player, played at every level in Scottish football. He, again, depression. He parked at a level crossing and there was a collision with a train. I'm going to go with Robert Enke.
German goalkeeper.
Likewise had severe depression and anxiety. He had a wife and 3 kids, 3 young kids. I believe the youngest was 8 months at the time. He jumped in front of a train because of his depression. And last of all, that I'm going to mention on here, probably the most well-known in recent years, Gary Speed. Former Wales manager, former midfielder for teams like Bolton. He was found hung in his garage, or as the police called, self-suspension. It was too late to save and revive. But these are just 4 examples from all levels of football, from the conference in England to European football, Enke was a goalkeeper at the World Cup for Germany, and where depression, anxiety, injuries, things like these causing different issues in people's lives. I suppose it comes to the question, do we think there's enough getting done to highlight the mental health in sports in general, football in particular? And is there enough getting awareness made about it?
So if I can jump in on this, if that's okay with everybody, to kind of jump on what's been said, but also to combat it. So in terms of the bigger picture, I don't think there is an awful lot of a focus on mental health in sport, and in particular in this situation, football. However, we have a local team near us that's been set up called Denny Warriors, and Denny Warriors is a fit club, so it's for people who have a waistline over 38 inches, but also it's for people with mental health issues, difficulties, and it is a fantastic organisation. It was covered quite a lot in the local media here, and there's been a massive interest. You know, I even being off a bigger build, tried to register my interest to take part in it, but they'd had a waiting list. It was ridiculous, but I think that maybe showed the need for clubs like that, because it's a mixture of issues, mental health being one of them. But they were often different bits and bobs together. They were helping paint and decorate Cloybank, Gav, which was quite good to get them out and about and stuff, and help local organisations. But I think what we have there is an example of football and sport being used as a good tool to help navigate, mental health problems, issues, difficulties. But yeah, I don't think nationally, there's enough being done to look at mental health in sport or football in particular. But that's just an example that I could think of off the top of my head.
Shahan, what's your opinion on the matter in terms of if there's enough support systems in place? Do you know of any in particular, actually? That's something that you've heard of?
I don't, but I don't think there is enough being done. Just talking about a story of somebody who has kind of suffered depression. Tyson Fury, obviously he's been in that situation, and obviously now he's a symbol for like mental health and how to tackle it and things like that. And if you just take him, and if you think how much of a legend he is within his sport, and the kind of unprecedented success that he's had over the years, you would think a person like that would be a happy person, like, living his life to the best, and which he has done, but obviously has went through the extreme forms of depression as well. I remember watching a video of his where he said that he was in his Ferrari or something. He was driving like 200 miles an hour on the motorway, literally aiming for a bridge to crash his car, and then he closed his eyes, and the kind of images of his children appeared in his mind, and that's what's made him stop. And he literally had to pull over and phone his wife and get her to come and pick her up and things like that. But I think for a lot of people, family and friendship can be a good anchor from, can help them come back into, to kind of work through these issues and help them through these issues. So I think there's, for people like that, I think like the families and stuff maybe have to take that extra step as well, maybe, I guess.
Two things from that, Shahan. Obviously, Tyson Fury, I remember seeing a video, I think it was actually last week, as soon as that, about him. A fan saw him, and he was a normal conversation, but he said from that 5-minute conversation, you could tell he had mental health issues, and he ran after him to go speak to him, and he spoke about him, about following his dreams and everything. And it seemed like this young lad actually really appreciated that from a hero, as you said. We've seen about family. I know from reading articles at the time and doing research from my graded unit that Chris Mitchell, who mentioned he parked at a level crossing, he was actually on the phone to his girlfriend when it happened. Obviously unable to prevent it. But James, do you think that there's, obviously family and such being an anchor, does there need to be more professional advertised help for high profile sporting personalities?
I would think so. I agree with everything that's been said thus far. I think at the higher levels of sport and as society as a whole, people just have the natural presumption that people are going to be feeling okay, that they've got material wealth, nice houses, nice cars, usually active on social media, looking like they've got a good life, an enjoyable life that lots of people can actually envy. But deep down, these people need help. They have demons that they are facing, and they need professional help to overcome them. So yes, more help is needed, and more awareness is needed. How you do that is very complex, but there's some simple ways to start getting the ball moving. There's some excellent charities out there. One that I'm particularly keen of is CAM, Campaign Against Living Miserably. They do fantastic work for men under the age of 45 in particular, but for all men who are going through depression, anxiety, and so on. You've got campaign groups as well, and encouraging men to talk about mental health with friends. For whatever reason, men seem to be more quiet about their emotions than women. That is slightly biological, psychological, but I also think it helps when men do open up to their peers and be frank about it, because you'll find out that a lot of people are facing similar situations and can offer help and assistance through experience. And I also think in sport in particular, in football to a lesser extent to other sports, but the tough man image is promoted in the media. Like Roy Keane is a prime example that comes to my head. There's an element of, oh, you must be tough. And whilst that's talking about physical toughness, people can naturally assume it also means mental toughness. And that means dealing with things yourself, closing in, and that is the complete opposite of what you need to do. So yeah, I think clubs have the responsibility to do it themselves. We're talking about super leagues and raising hundreds of millions of pounds. How can they not invest in mental health? It's a lot of simple answers for a complex issue.
Definitely. I know that from once again, like my research at the time of my college, there was things getting set up. This must have been about 2018 now, where you had the PFA setting up something down in England. There was a couple of similar things in Scotland, but as you say, charities and such foundations that are happening. Touching it again, Chris Mitchell, touching it because it is local to us. It's something I know about quite deeply. His family set up a foundation in his name after his tragic death, in order to try and raise more awareness, also helping young kids get more involved into the game, providing a bit more support to people of all ages, because we're talking about men's mental health in sport, football, with some specific examples. Shan gave us a nice boxing example there. A more elite level, whereas what doesn't get mentioned enough, I don't think, is, you're 15, 16, 17 years old playing for a decent level in youth football. You get an option to go to a professional team, or you're playing at a professional team at a young age, and you get your contract torn up in front of you. That can be devastating to a young person whose aim and dream is to make it at the highest level. Absolutely devastating. I know, James, you went through that yourself with an injury while you were playing at a decent level, and probably had the option to go pro if you kept going. From a personal point of view, how did that impact your kind of mentality at that stage? Obviously, not being fully aware at a young age about mental health and such, but I guess it would have had some effect on you.
Yes, I was probably too young to be fully aware of what was happening. I was 13, 14 at the time. So I wasn't really thinking about careers, but definitely if somebody asked me, what do you want to do when you're older? It was play football. So that was the vision and the dream, as you'd say. And yeah, I don't think I really appreciated how bad the injury was as well. So I don't think it all hit at once. It was something slowly developing. And then I was fortunate. Not you guys weren't fortunate, because it meant I started reading newspapers and getting into politics and so on. And that's why I bore you all to death about it. Because
I say that again.
Because when in the recovery from the injury, I managed to invest in something else, and I was lucky in a way that it happened slightly younger. If I was 16, 17, ready to break into first team football at some level, I think that would have been far more devastating. And at a time where career direction is much more difficult to attain. Those couple of years between 13 and 16 is when a lot of shaping takes place about what your future career is going to be. So I had that fortunate scenario where in my injury, I could spend that time forging a new career path. 16, 17, it becomes much more difficult. That's a fault in the education system, which I won't go into, but if your career ends immediately with a bad injury at such a young age, I can only imagine how devastating it would be. I know I felt bad, and that's even having the opportunity to diverge. So if that opportunity to diverge became much harder, it'd be much more difficult to deal with. And that support needs to be provided as well, mental health as well as educational support.
James Forrest had a similar issue, didn't he? He was off for a wee while because of mental health issues and things like that, wasn't
I am not aware of the example. I need to do some research about James Forrest.
Yeah. That's what I'd heard, so I thought I might ask you, because obviously he is a Celtic player. So
it's a potential thing to come back to, though. We'll look into it. But with James, you're saying about as you get older and more developed in your career, it becomes a bit harder. To go back to one of my examples, I said Dale Roberts, the Middlesbrough goalie and Rushden and Diamonds goalie. He was 24 at the time of his suicide. Again, it was he struggled to cope with his injury. It was career threatening, but he had a potential there. But obviously we spoke about the impact on the possible impact on youth players. With James, to open up to Shahan and Bruce, the other side of it, when a professional retires, that's something that we were told that Gary Speed always struggled with, to keep himself occupied after the routine of training and games and dieting and X, Y, and Z, with not having nothing to do. Not every former footballer can get into punditry and commentating or football management. Do we think that there needs to be more options for them after retirement? I know that we've got players who try to invest. So like Charlie Mulgrew, ex-Celtic player, invests in homes and real estate. Do we think that there needs to be more avenues and direction given to players once they retire?
I think, well, do you know who else invests in homes? First of all, is we know Dion Dublin invests in homes also when he's on Homes Under the Hammer. But yeah, to get back to your question around options coming out of retirement, it's worth noting that the routine that these people get themselves into is very strict, as you highlighted before. Do you know, it's very much, wake up, go to the training ground, eat X, Y, and Z, or do you know what I mean? Like it's very, although you don't feel it at the time because you enjoy what you're doing, it's very regimented, isn't it, to an extent? And because you want your body in peak physical condition to be doing the job. And I think that becomes a comfort for players, because you're doing it day in, day out, 7 days a week with a couple of days off, aren't you? So it becomes a comfort for these players. The brain becomes trained, and so that becomes difficult when you then break that habit, and you're then left sitting in the house wondering what you're going to do. And I think that's possibly when you can sometimes get inside your own head, and your demons or your problems then can sometimes get the better of you. So, because I know, like, and you guys will probably agree that, sometimes when you're sitting not doing anything for a long period of time, you start to overthink and overanalyze certain aspects. And, with these people's social media lives and everything the way they are, and private lives becoming public at times, you can start to overanalyze and get inside everything a bit, can't you? So I think there needs to be some option. I don't know what this option is, but there needs to be some support maybe to look at how we can keep these people busy so they don't have that downtime or too much downtime to start worrying and overanalyzing. And again, I don't know what this is, but I don't know what support there is out there in terms of professional football players who are coming out of that line of work. I don't know if that's something that we should be investing in a bit more to see where these skills can be transferred to.
I think when James said earlier he wouldn't go into education, but I think education is a key part of this. If we are to succeed, essentially, if I just take fans, so sometimes fans put too much pressure on the players themselves. If they're not performing well, they start getting abused on social media and things like that. That obviously starts playing up in your mind. Starts affecting your mental health. Or if fans start making these players into kind of godly figures, and then when they do eventually retire and they don't have that kind of exposure in public, and they're not really getting that much what do you call it, affection from fans on a daily basis, they then start to start wondering and analyzing their own life as to what they've done wrong now. But obviously they've done nothing wrong. They've just finished a phase of their life and they've got to find something else. But fans have led them to believe they are ultimate humans and nothing else can beat them. Do you know what I mean? And nothing else can affect them in that sense. So maybe I think if fans themselves maybe try to not make them into such massive deals, I guess that might sometimes help as well. But I know it's hard to do because obviously those are figures that we watch day in, day out play football for our beloved teams, and we enjoy watching them play. We enjoy for them to do well. So it is a difficult one. It is a very difficult one as to how you tackle it.
I don't think there's any quick fixes in this, but thank you guys for having the discussion on that. If you are watching this and you are suffering with anything mental health wise, not feeling yourself, do talk about it. It always makes it better. We also will leave some helplines in the description of this video for you. But guys, I think that takes us on very well to our last segment, as always, the usual round table. So this is the one I've been waiting for. I was going to bring up about the potential takeover of Arsenal, but I thought that would just make James sick. So we'll stay away from that. But what I've been looking, from James's advice, I've been looking at what's been trending on the old Twitter device. And what has been trending most this week has been the Line of Duty finale.
Now,
so my question for you, right now, Bruce, on you go.
Just be careful what you say, because as soon as we finish this recording, the telly's going on. I'm sitting down, I'm munching the Doritos, and Steve Arnott better no die. I don't care what happens, as long as Steve Arnott makes it out alive, we're okay.
Bruce, munching the Doritos, I've already told you, you've got high levels of saturated fat in your blood.
I know, but during Line of Duty, we need to increase those.
I think
I
might
haven't
need
seen
to.
Line of Duty yet, so.
Do you want to know who hates us?
Well, all I'm thinking is Spanish for James is it James or whatever? Do you know? Sounding tricky, sounding dodgy.
Still spelled with a J.
My question to you.
Spoiler alert! I'm going to add a special effect. Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! Off you go.
All right, okay. My question for you is: you're in the police. You're calling for backup because you're going against for a raid. 3 names, sporting personalities. Who do you want as your backup? I'm going to go first. Jose Mourinho, tactical genius. He's going to plan. This is your attack as we are going. Right? Very rarely does the host go first in this. So Jose Mourinho. I want someone to be able to go in with a knockout blow. Muhammad Ali in his prime. And then I want someone who's got the athleticism to help us manoeuvre, the agility. I'm going to go with LeBron James. That's my 3 backup. Shahan, we'll go with you.
The first one, and as soon as you said this, came to mind was Usain Bolt. In case somebody does end up leaving and voting for it, Usain Bolt can go after them. I'm gonna have to go with Mike Tyson because you chose Muhammad Ali. Mike Tyson definitely hit harder, didn't he? So definitely knocking somebody
Fights
out.
harder anyway.
Yeah. Well,
Last one.
might have to go with Virat Kohli with his bat, so he can start smashing people down with his bat. Either that or Babar Azam. So yeah.
Decent options. James, you're putting a lot of thought into this.
I'm struggling.
I'll go to Bruce first, and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
So I think I'm going to call for Bob because we all know Bob's reliable. Oh wait, doesn't matter. Alfredo Morelos, because we know he's not fair to get stuck in, right? Alfredo Morelos, he'll just sort it all out. Come at me.
Surely he'll get disciplined on the job all the time.
Nah, see, we're going rogue. We don't care what happens. Do you know what I mean? Just come at us and we'll
Creating their own subdivision.
We'll do what needs to be done, James. Do you know what I mean?
Rogue squad.
Bruce sitting in there like Martin Compson.
Exactly. This is all inspired. It's all inspired. But I don't know who else I'm taking. To be honest,
the names quickly. You've got 10 seconds.
No, I'm not picking anybody. I think Alfredo Morelos is the only backup you need. He does the job. I'm only taking him.
Fair enough. So this is where James picks Scott Brown to combat it.
Not after today. Scott Brown's going into retirement. In the police force. Semi-retirement, yes. Who would I want? I'm going to go for Vinnie Jones.
From Graham Potter.
Graham Potter. No, Vinnie Jones. Like a tough man, and I can get a movie out of it. So there you go. Get those likes on YouTube.
Based on a true life story.
I am going to go for Tiger Woods, so he can deal with the person's wife. Get her out the way when they have to deal with the suspect.
Family liaison.
Wow.
Other golfers are available.
And I'm going to go for Lance Armstrong, in case he cycles away. Suspect, just.
What if he doesn't cycle away?
Well, Lance Armstrong can just take some of his drugs.
He's quality control.
So there's my misfits. I think I'll have to call my team.
The Misfits. James's Misfits. Love it. I think we just found a title of our episode.
No, for title, I'm still going with Hamilton and the proverbial squirrel tail.
James's Misfits sounds like my love life.
Bathtub. That's all I'm saying. So I think that's all for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to give you James's normal spiel. Like us, comment, subscribe, tell us what your thoughts are. Share us, why not? Get our name out there, even if you want to say, look at these bunch of fannies. Any publicity is good publicity, isn't that right, James?
There's no such thing as bad publicity.
No.
Thank you very much for watching. We have been the Sports Hut Podcast. You have been our few viewers.
It's a Sports Hut Podcast.
Oh my goodness.